What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Drive Talk Cars. And in today's episode, we'll be installing lowering links on the rear suspension of my E63. So let's jump into it. If you've never heard of lowering links, basically they are links that tell the computer of the suspension, the air suspension, how far to raise or drop the car. It's a link between a sensor and the suspension, and depending on how high it is or how long it is, it determines how much height it needs to raise or lower. And that's always adjusting on the aromatic system of the Mercedes-Benz. So you may hear it sometimes, or you may see it drop or raise up depending on how much weight load you have in the car. So if you have a E63 or 350 or 550 or any Mercedes that has air suspension components, then you will have a link system. And in order to lower the car, you would have to adjust those links. So it's a lot simpler than springs, where you have to take out the springs and put lower, smaller springs on the strut. For my W212, it has air suspension in the rear, and then front has regular steel suspension with a strut and springs and all that. So to drop the suspension in the back, we're gonna put in a shoulder link. And in the front, if you had the links, you would put a longer link and that would drop it. But since mine only has the rear air suspension, we're gonna just focus on the rear. So let's get into it and see what we get. So right now I'm gonna show you what it is now, then I'll show you how to change it, then we'll look at the final results at the end. So let's get into it. So as you can see here, we have about a 2-finger gap. I want it to be about a 1 finger, so I think I want to bring it down about an inch. I just want to fill up this wheel well. All right, the first thing we're going to do is take off the wheels on both sides. That way we can get easy access to the link. Alright, so with the wheel off now, you have this area exposed, and if you look back here, right there, that is the link. So that's the link that we are going to be replacing. This is the sensor here. This little arm here connects to that, and then that connects to the upper control arm. And that's how it determines how much height to apply to the air suspension, or how much air to supply to adjust the height and the suspension for the air suspension. So we replace that with this. This is adjustable, and we can make it lower. So the shorter it is, the lower it goes. The higher it is, the higher it is. So I'm going to take that off, and then we can examine it closer, the difference between this one and that one. Okay, so there's a few ways to get this link off. One is to pry it off. Another one is to push it off. So you'll push it off like that. If you had some pliers that went like that, instead of like this, you push it away. You could do that. So I find that the easiest way is to take off this bracket right here. And that will allow for you to take the link off a lot easier. But like I said, there's other ways to do it. Just pick the best way that's good for you. So I'm going to use a 10mm wrench here. I have the ratchet box wrench here. It works pretty good for a situation like this, so I don't have to take it on and off the nut. I have a link in the description down below for a tool like this if you don't have one already. So I'm just going to reach underneath here and put my wrench on here. Now, this is kind of flimsy and fragile, the sensor and the bracket that it is on. So I hold it at the top while I'm turning it, just so I don't break it, because this is pretty sensitive. This whole little mechanism here is pretty flimsy. This is a little difficult to show with the camera, but I might just have to take it off and then show you afterwards. Alright, we have the nut off, and then this bracket comes off here. So as you see here, the bracket is off. Now with the bracket off, you can pull this. Don't want to break it, but you can put a little pressure on it, turn it, and then it comes off. Alright, so here's the old link and the bracket that I took off. This is a 10mm nut. When you get the bracket off, it makes it a lot easier to pull the link off of the bracket, because you can pull it and then it pops off. So that's the link. So here's the stock link, and this is the aftermarket link, the adjustable one that we're going to use to lower it. This is 60 millimeters or 6 centimeters or 3 inches or just shy of 3 inches. So to reduce this and drop it down, the rule of thumb is every 5 millimeters will produce an inch drop. So if this is already 60 millimeters, if I go to 55 millimeters on this one, then I will have an inch drop. So I'm going to do 55 because that is around the area that I think will look good. And then we'll see what that produces once we lower the car, put the wheels back on, all that. So this particular one has a pin locking system. These things come off, you just push it back like this, and then the pin comes out. This is going to lock it in once you clamp the ball socket onto the ball joint. You want to make sure that you lock the locking nut very tight before you put it on. This ensures that this part doesn't move. And there's another lock on this ball joint as well, or ball socket, that you want to lock onto the ball joint. So the way that I measured this was by placing the center of the hole onto the ruler here, and that gave me 6 centimeters, which is equal to 60 millimeters, and I want to drop it by 5. So when I have the aftermarket one, I want it to be, I'm going to do the same thing, start in the middle of the ball socket there, and then in the middle of this ball socket, it should read 5.5, and that would be equivalent to 1 inch or 55 millimeters. So this is, like I said, I'm using centimeters, so this is 5.5 centimeters, which equates to 50 millimeters, which should result in an inch drop. I will have a link to this product here, the lowering link that I have. I got it off of eBay, it wasn't too bad, 70 bucks I think. So let's put this back on, and then we'll put everything back together, and then we'll drop it and see what the results are. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put the bracket back onto the new link. Just pop it. You wanna pop it back onto the ball joint there. And then, like I said before, you wanna make sure you put your locking clamp back in. Just goes in those holes, and then you push it back down, and that locks it onto the ball socket. So before you put it back on the ball joint in this bracket here, you wanna make sure that the ball sockets are facing the opposite directions. That way you don't have to do anything after you put it on. All right, so we're gonna put this back on the sensor here. Put your nut back on. All right, I'm gonna put the bottom part on, take my clamp off. All right, push that on, put the clamp back on. All right, so the hole is on the opposite side, so that's gonna make it hard to see. All right, so we got the pin back on here, lock it, and we're good to go. And that is it. So then we're gonna put the wheels back on, drop it down, check out the final results. So after the car has settled, it has gone down a little bit more, but it is still at a good height. I can fit one finger in there, just about. There's no rubbing, and everything is good. So this is the final result and where it will sit going forward. All right, there you have it. We have successfully installed the lowering links. I think it came out good. If you found this video useful and you enjoyed it, please give me that thumbs up. Also, stay tuned for the next video, or it may not be the next one, but I'm gonna be lowering the front with springs, so make sure you don't miss that. And remember, do it until you can't. Until next time, I'm out. To take off this bracket.
Could you try again?
The fuck?